This list is the list of things that are actually not reversible. So these come again under that umbrella of conditions that cause dementia. Alzheimer's being the commonest. And then Lewy body is a condition which is related to Parkinson's disease. It's not exactly like Parkinson's disease, but it has some of the features of Parkinson's disease. Frontal temporal dementia is also known as Pick's disease. This is a disease that affects the frontal lobes of the brain. And this is a condition where memory loss may actually not be the most common feature. And it's also rarer than the other conditions. Vascular dementia is very, very common, or probably not the pure kind of vascular dementia, but the vascular dementia which is in combination with Alzheimer disease. And the more that we learn about the relationship between these two things, the more that we understand that the interlinking between vascular or arterial diseases and conditions like Alzheimer's. Huntington's kind of stands alone as primarily a genetically mediated condition. So Huntington's disease occurs, the transmission is autosomal dominant, which means that if you have a parent with it, you have a 50-50 chance of inheriting it. So it's different, and it's well understood in terms of what the genetic mutation is in that particular disorder. So probably more so than most of the others. Infectious diseases, now this would include neurosyphilis, which we don't see much of anymore, but at one time neurosyphilis was probably one of the primary causes of dementia, and there were many people who became institutionalized and lived out their lives as a consequence of having that particular infectious disease, syphilis. We do see a HIV-related dementia, which is an infectious kind of dementia, and we can also see herpes encephalopathy, which can lead to some chronic deficits as well. And then the last one there, the Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, this is another interesting and unique kind of dementia in that it's rapidly progressive, and it's related to a Prion disease, which a prion is actually a particle which is smaller than a virus, if you can imagine what that looks like. It's really just a sequence of amino acids, it's really just a protein. And but it is the agent responsible for conditions that you may know as mad cow disease and that whole range of conditions like it.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could I just ask a quick question?
Yes, please.
With regard to frontotemporal dementia, is the involuntary jerking movements, is that related to that type of dementia, or is it more common in, like, say, Lewy body dementia? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. I would not say that it's a common feature of frontotemporal dementia, no. But it can be a feature of a type, so the Huntington's dementia that I've mentioned, that's a condition that has a linkage to frontotemporal dementia as well, and that those jerking movements are typical of Huntington's disease. Now, it depends on what stage you're talking about as well, right? Because early in the course of these conditions, there may not be any peripheral nervous system involvement, so that all that you see are the symptoms that affect the brain itself. As time goes on, though, more and more there will be recruited into the number of symptoms that the person has. There will be more and more of what are called motor symptoms, which would include tremors and jerks and loss of balance and those kinds of problems.
This would have been moderate to severe.
All right.
By the time.
So in moderate to severe, you might expect to see some changes like that. It's not early on, but in the later stages of the disease, yes, that can definitely happen. Okay.
So, and you're going to decide?
Yeah. We'll talk a little bit more about frontotemporal and there may be some other questions that we can focus on that. Okay, so this is a little bit scrambled.
Yeah,
That's
we're
okay.
a little bit scrambled, but this 65 goes with Alzheimer's.
Yeah. So this is really a breakdown of how frequent these various kinds of dementias are. So as you can see, the 65% for Alzheimer disease. So Alzheimer disease is the commonest of all of them. Again, we are more and more appreciating how many cases are actually a mixture of vascular and Alzheimer disease, and understanding that both the vascular dementia and the Alzheimer dementia in their pure conditions are actually relatively rarer than we thought. And perhaps the biggest group that we're looking at now might be more the group where there's actually a mixture of those two pathologies together. You know, we can talk more about that. There's some very elegant studies that have looked at that situation, which allow me to make that comment about it today. The others, the Lewy body, and all the others, the Pick's disease, the frontotemporal, and the rarer ones like the Jakob-Creutzfeldt, all these all together, they only make up 8% of all the dementias that we know of. So these are small percentages. Mostly we are dealing with Alzheimer's and vascular disease, with Lewy body as a third, relatively frequent, but not as frequent as the others. Okay.
So these type of disorders too, they can occur at a much earlier age than,
Yes.
right, 50s, 60s.
Yes, they can.
It's not like you have to be elderly or old to get some of these,
No.
right? You know.
So actually, I think the next slide addresses that very issue. So that's right here. So these are some statistics about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias in Canada. So we know we have about 500,000 people in Canada. We know that 71,000 of them are under the age of 65 and 50,000 are under the age of 60. So they do occur in those younger age groups as well. They may be slightly different, you know, and we'll talk a little bit about that too in terms of the genetics of those. But yes, that's a very important point. You know, people talk about Alzheimer's disease. I think there's a tendency to confuse the name Alzheimer's disease with old-timer's disease. I've heard people say that, and it's really not old-timer's disease. It's you know, it can affect people at a very young age. I've seen myself patients in their mid-40s.
How about, oh, sorry, I should let you continue. I'll ask later.
No, please, go ahead.
Oh, I'm just curious to know about people who were never diagnosed, like with attention deficit disorder, hyperactive, that kind of thing. Would that, you know, some of that kind of come in underneath the, you know, like a lot of people have never, or generations before us, people who went through the whole lives with these type of, you know.
I'm not aware of any specific link between attention deficit disorder and later evolution of dementia. However, there may be a way in which that might be linked, which is that individuals who have attention deficit disorder often have difficulty getting through school and, you know, moving on into higher education. Not exclusively the case, but sometimes that is the case. And there is a linkage between intellectual, you know, I guess intellectual development in terms of educational factors and other ways that people learn things. There is a link between that and the reserve of the brain in terms of being able to ward off you know, conditions like Alzheimer's disease. So that is one of the risk factors, is having a lower level of education or a lower level of, I mean, you can be self-educated as well, you know, so it's not necessarily what grade you finished in school, but it does tie into the overall intellectual development of the person. And the way that is thought to be the case, the reason for that is thought to be that the more stimulation that you have in your development, you know, in your early life, the more branching and the more growth there is of neurons in the nervous system.
Sure.
And so when you have that background, then you have a bit of protection, you know, in terms of reserve. The brain has that much more reserve. Maybe it's like an athlete, you know, who's somebody who's a great
Stamina.
runner. They have more stamina, and even in their later life, they may still reap the benefits, you know,
Right.
health-wise of having been more active.
Right.
Okay. So where are we? Yeah.
What am I
Right. So the usual number for the percentage of people over the age of 65 is usually between 5 and 10%, and 33% by the time that you reach the age of 85, which means, you know, 1 in every 3 individuals of that age will have one of these conditions, which is fairly alarming, you know, when you think about how common that really is. We should also note that it's more common in women, and part of the reason for that may be because women live longer, but there may be other reasons related to the reason for that, including
Like what
hormonal.
we were just talking about as well, the early development where, right, things are, yeah, that'll be a long conversation.
Yeah. So this is an estimation that's been made that where we now have 500,000 people in Canada, we're predicting that in 25 years we may have well over 1 million. And that has an enormous influence on people who deal with health economics. So we think that the current cost annually for the care of the 500,000 people that we have in Canada now, we think an estimation of the cost of the illness is about $15 million a year. We think that by the time it reaches 1 million people in the next 25 years, that the cost will grow by a factor of 10 to $150 billion annually. So
Wow,
it's a
so-
very important health problem.
Yeah, especially the rest of the world, like we're in the States, for example, where who's going to pay to take care of those people?
Well,
They don't
yeah.
have, right?
Don't think we have a really good answer to that, but I think, you know, we are aware of the issue at least, and hopefully can make some argument to whoever deals with health economics that this has to be planned for.
Well, yeah, it's a
over
real,
time.
yeah, it's a real issue to be, yeah, definitely. Right.
Okay, so how does this affect each and every one of us? Well, almost all of us know people who have the condition, and 17% of us have someone who, a close relative or an immediate family member who may have it. In Newfoundland, we have, we think, around almost 8,000 people with this diagnosis currently.
So is it like a higher percentage,
In
Or-
Newfoundland?
like regionally, or
I don't think so.
No.
I think we're
it's kind
pretty
of
much
national
keeping
norm?
on the average. There may be, we do have more vascular disease, which I think maybe over time will translate into more problems with these related conditions, but I think we're keeping more or less to the national average at the moment.